The Tragically Hip announced today that their lead singer and major creative force, Gord Downie, has died. In May of last year, they came out and said that Gord was suffering from glioblastoma multiforme, a particularly deadly form of brain cancer that has very little treatment and no cure. It doesn't make it easier knowing that far in advance that he was going to be taken away from us. For this American, the hip are Canada. I feel that Canada is less today with the loss of such a creative genius, and I am certainly less knowing that I won't be able to hear any more songs from him. That someone with that kind of genius is taken away. It's just really disheartening. I first heard about the hip watching SNL when Dan Aykroyd came out in his giant Canadian jersey and said, "These are my friends from Kingston, Ontario." And watching Gord on stage in the first 10 seconds while the band performed the intro to Grace 2, seeing him stand there with his hand on the mic, bobbing his head back and forth as he did, and wiggling his foot on the ground, there was something there that just astounded me, that I'd never seen anything like that before or since from someone else. His pent-up ferocity just astounded me. And I knew before he even sang a note that I was going to buy that album right away as soon as the stores opened the next morning. I've been following the band for more than 20 years now, and I've seen them in concert many times. Most recently at their first show in Vancouver for their final tour. Most memorably, though, was on December 7th, 2012, when they played Showbox Soto in Seattle for the Now for Plan A tour. And I got to the location early because it was general admission and I wanted to get a good spot. I ran into one of the bandmates outside the show and asked him if they were going to play a song called Gus the Polar Bear from Central Park. And he didn't know whether it was on the playlist or not. But I had my little Gus doll that I bought at Central Park when I went to New York. And I got in line and was able to get a really good spot, dead center in the front of the stage. And the band eventually came out, and Gord looked right at me and pointed, and the third song in was Gus 2, or was Gus. And it was such a great show. Every time I saw them perform it was worth every penny I spent doing it. Their songs meant a lot to me, even though I'm not Canadian. And they never really broke out in big ways outside of Canada because their music was so much tied up into Canadian history and culture and literature and art and hockey and things that just don't translate well to American audiences. But I didn't care about any of that because I could see the talent behind all of the lyrics. Late in his life, Gord started caring about First Nations people in Canada and the way that they were being treated and the difficulties in their life. And he wrote an album about a guy named Chani Wenjack, who was taken from his home as a young child and put into a school far away from home just because they thought it was better for him to be there than at home. Channy ran away from the school and died trying to get home from lack of food and warmth in the on the hundreds of miles journey from the school to his home. And the secret journey, or the secret path, was Gord's tribute to him and to his struggles to just be a First Nations person in Canada. He has one final album coming out later this month, and I don't know what songs are on it. I haven't heard any clips or anything, but I know that I'm going to buy it. To give you some idea, if you're unfamiliar with the Hip, when it was announced that Gord was dying, it led the national news in Canada. I don't believe there is any American band or singer whose impending death would lead the national news. Not even Tom Petty, who died recently, led the national news when he was gone, even though his death was really sudden and unexpected. It didn't lead the news. This tells you how important the Hip were to Canada and Canadians. When they had their final concert in Kingston in August of 2016, the CBC broke out of Olympics coverage to show that concert. And it was attended by the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. I don't believe there's any American band whose final concert would interrupt the Olympics here in the U.S. or in any country for that matter. They really were Canada. And Canada's the less today for the loss of Gord Downie. And I am the less, even as an American, because I got it. I've been spending the day going through my Twitter feed and Facebook posts about Gord's loss. And I found a particularly stirring tribute from Stefan Molyneux, and I'll post a link to that video in the notes below. And if you've not heard the Hip, you need to go to thehip.com or iTunes or wherever else you get your music and listen to this amazing band. That's all I got for today.